everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be whizzing you through all of the books that I read in December. I shouldn't say I only read 7 books in December, but I only read 7 books in December. It was a very busy month. Also apologise for the crappy lighting. It's the middle of the day, but it's super dark. The first book that I read in December was The Weight of Water by Sarah Crossan. Sarah Crossan is an author who I've read 2 books from before. One I absolutely loved, the other I really disliked. And this book was somewhere between the two. This book is published by Bloomsbury and it is a book about a young girl and her mother who move from Poland to the UK. The mother is in search of her husband who has left her. She knows he has moved to the UK and she's trying to get back in touch with him. And you're very aware throughout this book that she's being quite naive about the whole thing. This book is told through the eyes of the daughter, who is experiencing a lot of new things at school. She's experiencing a lot of prejudice. She is experiencing a lot of people underestimating her intelligence. And there were a lot of really poignant moments to do with things like that in this book. However, it just became abundantly clear that this was not like an own voices book. It's not a bad book, it's not a bad book by any means, but I didn't love it. What I really do love about Sarah Crossan's writing is that she writes YA books in the verse format, which I think she did masterfully in her novel One. It was just kind of fine in this book. I am going to read her newest novel Moonrise because I've heard a lot of good things about that, but I was very underwhelmed by The Weight of Water. The next 2 books I read were part of the same series. They are part of the Geek Girl series by Holly Smale. I read Head Over Heels and I also read Forever Geek, and these are the penultimate and the last books in the series. The Geek Girl books were such comfort reads for me and I've been reading them for the past few months and I've really enjoyed them. They follow our protagonist Harriet, who is a teenage girl who is stereotypically kind of geeky. She knows a lot of facts, she can be quite naive at points, she's a little bit socially awkward, but she also is thrust into a modelling career. And that's kind of just the setting for these series of books. What these books are actually about is Harriet growing up, and it's about her relationship with a whole host of different kinds of people. It's about her familial relationships, about her friendships, about her romantic relationships. And in Head Over Heels, it's really about her relationship with herself. It's about her understanding herself as a person. It's about her coming to realise a lot of things about herself and being a bit more self-critical, self-reflective. And that is kind of carried on to the last book, Forever Geek. It's a lot more about Harriet's understanding of herself, but there's also a lot to do with her friendship with her best friend. It has a lot to do with her romantic relationships, her familial relationships, and particularly her relationship with her grandmother. In Forever Geek, we see Harriet and her best friend and her grandmother go on holiday to Australia. And throughout this book series, Harriet has been incredibly naive, and we really see that come to the forefront in the last book. I wasn't blown away by the final 2 books in the series, but I really enjoyed reading the series nonetheless. I thought it was really fantastic. I thought it was a wonderful comfort read for me, and I'm excited to see what Holly Smale does next. Next up, I read Rachel Joyce's The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. This is about a retired man named Harold who one day receives a letter from an old friend who he used to work with called Queenie, and this letter reveals that Queenie has cancer and that she doesn't have a whole lot of time left. Harold writes a response to this letter and goes to post it, but then he suddenly decides that no, that's not what he wants to do. What he actually wants to do is walk to Queenie. There is a map at the back of this book that shows how far Harold walks. So he walks all the way from Kingsbridge, which is at like the bottom of Cornwall. I think they are precious. All the way up to Berwick, which is just on the Scottish-English border. So basically, he walks really bloody far and he's not prepared for it at all. He hasn't like trained for this or anything. He hasn't got like the right kind of clothing or equipment. But he decides that if he does this walk, Queenie will keep living. But really what this book is about Harold understanding himself. It's about him having the time to think and look back on his life and look at his relationship with his wife, his relationship with his work, his relationship with his family and himself and his son. I thought this was a really touching book, and I think it showed the extraordinary in ordinary lives, and I really think that Rachel Joyce is going to be a writer that I'm absolutely going to love. This wasn't like a 5-star read for me or anything like that, but I thought it was really good. Next up, I read a short story collection, and that was Scary Old Sex by Arlene Hayman, and this is published by Bloomsbury. I really liked this collection. So this is a short story collection that it's about people. It's about people's actions and their inner thoughts and their inner demons. And somehow all of these stories are related to sex. The stories are explicit and detailed without being arousing or titillating. Like, this isn't porn. It would be fine if it was, but it's not what it is. It's really honest, which I thought was really powerful in a short story collection that has to do with sex. I think as a society we can be quite dishonest about sex, and this collection is very honest, but also very honest about the dishonesty of sex, if that makes sense. Some of these stories I liked more than other ones. There was one story that was about a young girl who had a relationship with an artist who was much older than her. That was possibly my favourite story in this collection. There's another story about a couple and one of them is in the hospital and them trying to work out if they can have any kind of a sex life. If you're interested in these kind of things, then I can highly recommend this short story collection, but I don't really think it's for everyone, but that's okay. This tiny little book I'm going to talk about is one I read around Christmas time, and that was The Christmas Truce by Carol Ann Duffy, with illustrations by David Roberts. Every year, Carol Ann Duffy brings out a little Christmas poem in these little adorable books. This is the first time I'd ever read one of them, and I really, really enjoyed it. This one is set at the backdrop of the First World War. It's set in 1914 on Christmas Day. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the story of when soldiers stopped fighting in order to have a game of football. And this is just a really lovely, pleasant, touching, heartwarming depiction of that story. These are published by Picador, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of these over the next few Christmases. And the final book that I wanted to talk about that I read in the month of December was the illustrated edition of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling, with illustrations done by Jim Kay. I have been rereading these illustrated editions as they've come out. I got this one as a graduation present, but I waited until around Christmas time to read it because I thought it would be a really lovely comfort read, and it definitely was. I think the illustrated editions of these books are wonderful ways to re-experience this world. I think they add a lot of texture and depth to the stories. I think Jim Kay is a phenomenal artist. And while I'm currently having quite complex feelings about J.K. Rowling as a person, the Harry Potter universe is still such a wonderful place for me to go when I'm feeling a little bit stressed, when I'm feeling a little bit down. It's just an utterly gorgeous book, and I would highly recommend these illustrated editions to anyone. I think it's been a bit of a short wrap up, this one. December wasn't a really standout reading month for me, and that's absolutely fine. I did expect it to be really casual, and it was. I kind of needed a unexciting reading month, if that makes sense. But yeah, do let me know down below if you have read any of these books and what you think of them. I'm really excited to get going on my reading in 2018, and I hope you are too. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you guys in my next video.